I'm Sangeeta De, a research scholar from Tejpur University, India. I, along with my co-author, Atit Borua, a research scholar from NIT Silchar, are presenting a paper on death and colonial hangover in the Vampire Diaries, a study of visual representations in the audiovisual fantasy genre. Next slide, please. So, to begin with, the Vampire Diaries, the series, ran from 2009 to 2017 across 8 seasons. And at its core, it is supernatural drama about vampires, witches, werewolves, and humans. So the series constantly engages with death. Characters die, return, grieve, and seek immortality. It has also been hugely popular in India, inspiring remakes such as Pyar Ki Ek Kahani and Mere Ishq Mein Ghayal. So in this presentation, we will explore how the show presents visual aesthetics of death, subscribing to colonial ideologies. Can you move to the next slide, please? So the text centrally focuses on death representations of major characters such as Catherine, Bonnie, Jeremy, Elizabeth, Jenna, Elena, and Caroline. Next slide. Okay, so coming to the methodology section, first of all, the essence of this paper is the triple intersection of death studies, media studies, and colonialism. And this study we will do with the help of psychoanalysis. So we have employed Carl Jung's idea of psychoanalysis, which is archetypes. So the archetypes that have been mainly looked at are the archetypes of trickster, archetypes of self, and the archetypes of great mother. Next slide. Okay, so coming to the research questions and objectives. So the paper seeks to explore in what ways can a Western psychoanalytic lens be applied to analyze the depiction of death, dying, and bereavement in the Vampire Diaries, and how the series, reflects Eurocentric philosophies of death, and how the show's way of showcasing death potentially marginalizes Oriental cultural perspectives. And the objectives include how the Eurocentric philosophies of death is being represented in the show, and how it intersects a Western psychoanalytic lens of looking at the painting of death in the series with the ideas of death in Christianity mainly. So the paper also starts with thought on how diverse cultural perspectives may be acknowledged. Now I invite my co-author Agneet to carry forward this discussion and begin with the analysis section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. So, to begin the analysis section, first of all, we need to establish the premise of colonialism in the series The Vampire Diaries. That is when we will be able to talk about the colonial hangover, or how the death representation and the aesthetics they subscribe to colonial beliefs, right? So, the four species which are primary in the series, the vampires, the witches, the werewolves, and the humans, we have looked at them from the lens of colonialism, and the vampires are squarely in team colonizers. At various points, the original family, Rebecca, Niklaus, Elijah, they talk about the story of how their family moved from Europe to the New World, to America, and lived peacefully amidst the localites for a while. But after that, they became the predatory species. That is exactly the story of colonization, and especially in the Indian context, right? The colonizers arrived on Indian shores. They started off as traders. They got the permits from the kings, and later they grew in power and started ruling the subcontinent. The witches, we have looked at them as the natives in power, right? This is very interesting. In the show, the witches are the one who create the vampires with their magic, right? What we want to say is the natives in power are actually the people who created the colonizers, because the people who touched the shores of India were traders. It was the natives in power, the royal class, the aristocratic class. They involved them in their internal politics and their internal affairs, which led to the power growing and the situation of the colonizers starting to rule the subcontinent. On the other hand, the werewolves are, the tribal communities whose habitats the colonizers tried to take away, but they put up a stiff resistance. So we know in many shows, vampires and werewolves are always pitched against each other. In this particular show, werewolves have a very interesting introduction, right? The primary vampires that we see from the start of the show, Stefan and Damon, via whose ideas we the audience or the viewers get a gaze into the show, they do not know of the existence of werewolves. They think that werewolves are extinct, and later they get to know that werewolves remain, and they start learning about werewolves. There is no knowledge about werewolves, there is no scholarship about werewolves, right? But once they get to know about werewolves, they become sort of pitched against one another. That is how we have drawn the analogy to Indian colonialism, wherein werewolves are the tribal communities whose habitats the colonizers tried to take away, but they put up a stiff resistance. And then come the humans. The humans are seen as the lower strata of people living in urban areas whose voice and opinions did not really matter. They could not put up a resistance, they could not do anything, right? In the case of Indian colonialism, those people later, of course, they started revolting, but those people at first, they, were totally under the rule of the colonizers and never could put up a resistance. And similarly, in the series, the humans are totally at the mercy of the vampires. Now, the corresponding ideas of death. So the premise that we have established, how do the deaths, or especially the visual aesthetics of death in the series, correspond to the analogy of colonialism? The vampire deaths, first of all, the vampire death happens with wooden bullets. Very interesting. Wooden bullets, we have looked at it as a representation of nature. It is always seen in the study of eco-criticism, in the theorization of eco-criticism, that the global south, the people of the global south are seen as people whose lives are intertwined with nature and the natural elements, which is tried to be harmed by the people of the global north coming here and bringing in their ideas of science, their ideas of industrialization, and their ideas of urbanization, right? But the killing of vampires with only and only wooden bullets and no other bullets puts up a commentary that a colonized lot can throw off the yoke of their colonizers only by going back to their own culture, right? Apart from that, vampire deaths in the series, they take time. The sight is ugly. They desiccate slowly, right? That really shows how vampires, how there is a gaze that vampire deaths deserve more bereavement than the death of other species, because the werewolf deaths, the witches deaths, and the human deaths, those are very immediate. They do not take time. There is no desiccation. Nothing of that sort happens, right? And there are two special cases. Jeremy dies multiple times in the show. Jeremy is the primary character, Alina's brother, and he dies multiple times in the show. But all the times he comes back. Firstly, he comes back, and secondly, the visual is that he dies almost immediately, and there is nothing to do. Especially also in the case of Elizabeth Forbes, or Liz, who is Caroline's mother. She stays in bed, and she is ill for a very long time. But during that time, the focus is never on her disease. The focus is on how Caroline is going about in her journey to find a cure for her mother, how a new character, Enzo, tries to flirt with her, how she tries to make the house comfortable for her mother, and then even her love arc with Stefan is also explored, right? So everything is done just to avoid showing Elizabeth's slow movement, slow transition towards the dead state, right? So that is what we see in the show. It is all, the commentary is always such that vampire deaths deserve more bereavement and more grief than the deaths of any other species, and that is exactly the colonial philosophy, wherein the white male, the colonizer, is human, and the others are not at par with him. They are subpar, they are subhumans, right? So I would like to ask Sanhita to take over once again.
Okay, so yeah, as discussed by my friend Agneet, so we come to see that how death and grief. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, death and grief occur to different characters differently and is represented differently as such. So, however, later it is realized that one need not grieve at all, or maybe grieve each day by not letting go, because time and again we come to see that the primary characters somehow come back to life, be it from the other side, or from inside the stone, or from hell. Now, as mentioned earlier, Jung was a scholar who has contributed to the field of death studies, and he too worked with themes such as the psychological aspects of understanding death and people's bereavement and grief. So, Jung's archetypes that we are using that help one to work with the diversity in cultural perspectives of death across societies and various characters and situations in the show, representing the various archetypes. So the first archetype that we are using is the trickster archetype, and this archetype is being shown by the character called Katrina Petrova or Catherine Pierce, who embodies this trickster archetype, and throughout the show we come to see how she creates trouble in everyone's lives by but she also occasionally help the primary characters. So we come to understand that she is the best example of a character which in the first place cheats death time and again, and even when she finally dies she comes back to life, and the most iconic return being her return from hell. So here I'll bring the Indian concepts of death. So this our Indian philosophy of death have at its core about letting go of attachment to the person who has passed away. So we take the case of India because we are from that society, and it is a previously colonized land wherein a lot of cultural erasure was attempted, and also the show in question is quite popular in India. In the Sanatan philosophy, or in the Sanatan Dharma, which is also intertwined as Hinduism, it is believed that there is a shapeless, formless Parabrahman who is considered God. Now, for a person on earth, the body is destructible, but the soul is not. So, it is the body that dies, but the soul enters a new body and starts a new life. It is said that this cycle continues until the soul attains moksha or liberation and goes and joins the Parabrahman. So moksha is what is aimed for, and it is for that the people try to perform good deeds and live a righteous life. So in any case, attachment to the body is discouraged to make easier for the souls of the deceased to pass on, and the limbo is believed to be uncomfortable for them. And that is why, the corpses are cremated. So even though the souls live on for the body, which gives one a particular identity, death is quite final, especially the last rites performed on the 11th day of someone's death. But here, interestingly, the Christian biblical concept of death believes in the day of judgment. So in other mythologies of Europe, ancient Greek and Roman beliefs talk about the judgment of souls in the afterlife, and Slavic paganism has the culture of ancestor worship and communication with the deceased. So for all these beliefs to make sense, the identity of the person essentially needs to remain the same, which is why he or she is buried in a coffin. The very point of gravestones here is to remember that identity, and the surviving loved ones of the deceased go there to put flowers and pay respects. That essentially is a way of holding on and not letting go. So overall, that is where the researchers place the concept of evading the finality of death time and again by the primary characters, and the incessant attempts of their loved ones, to bring them back. So in the first place, that the viewers see the dead supernatural characters are in a living, or almost in a living condition, is basically on the other side. So in the show, it is described as a dimension in which the spirits of the supernatural creatures existed, separated from the world in which the humans and supernaturals who are alive live by an invisible wall. So it is essentially a sort of a liminal space that initially Arnold van Gennep talks in his Rite of rites of passage, which also Carl Jung incorporates in his study. And Jung talks about it in the sense that the wall is a boundary, and the creatures on the other side can see and hear the beings on this side, but cannot feel or interact with them normally. So it is as though they are neither here nor there. So it is called a spirit world, kind of, but they are still very much tangible and retain the clothes and hairdo that they had at the time of their death. So it is very interesting to note this, that in the Sanatan philosophy. Okay.
15 minutes.
Sorry?
15 minutes. Put you around off and give us a conclusion.
Okay. 3 minutes. Did you just say that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you were not. Okay.
Okay, I think they're asking us to wrap up due to the paucity of time. I understand. We are so sorry. So just to wrap up, so we have also used Jung's idea of the self archetype and also the archetype of the Great Mother. For a further discussion on this, if anyone wishes to, they can definitely mail us, or we'll be happy to have the conversation. Just to conclude, this work problematizes the subscription to colonial philosophies as seen in the death representations in audiovisual media, and talks about the need to recognize various cultures, because the show is set in America, right? And America also has the natives, and it is popular all across the world, and many people watch it from various different cultures, right? So this can be a first step towards decolonizing death studies. And just to end it all, we would like to just give a shout out and say that we are grateful to Dr. Devalina Kundu, Dr. Panagiotis Penteris, Dr. Stacy Pitsilidis, and Hajar Ghurbani. Thank you so much for your invaluable guidance and assistance at so many points. Thank you so much for this platform, the University of Utrecht and DDD. Thank you.
There was a lot of information that was new for me, so I'm still thinking about it. Do we need any more clarification? No? Online or clarification? So the floor is over for general discussion. Sure, good. We're talking about that. First of all, everything about